have our Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement on the beginning of our agenda. We will be reading that at the meetings quarterly, but just to show that we still have our statement of support and acknowledgement. We do not, excuse me, I'm sorry. Oh, welcome, Councilmember Pacheco. We have been given our agenda in advance and had a chance to look over it. Are there any changes, additions, anything for the agenda? All right, then we don't need a motion, so without objection, that the agenda is approved. And then we have before us the April 9th draft minutes of the Special Management Committee. Everyone again has had a chance to look at those, review them. Are there any changes, edits, questions? All right, then seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the draft minutes from April 9th.
Move approval.
Moved by Lilligren, seconded by Osman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That passes unanimously. Now we move on to our non-consent business items. These are reports of standing committees, and our first item is 2025-98. It's Metro Green Line Extension Amendment number 3 to Legal Services Agreement with the Attorney General's Office, and we've got, who do we have with us here today? Peter, welcome. Thank you for being here. If you could just reintroduce yourself for the millions of people at home who want to get to know you more.
That's right.
That are watching us intently today. Yep.
That's fun to be famous.
Thank you for being
Chair members.
Thank you for being
My name is Peter Hanf. I'm in the Office of the General Counsel, and I am presenting this business item today. So council staff is seeking an amendment to an existing contract that the council has with the Minnesota Attorney General's Office. The contract relates to condemnation services for the Metro Green Line extension. The contract was signed in 2021, and it transferred 15 of the most, I would say, complex acquisitions to the AGO. And we did that for a couple of different reasons. Number one, because we had we had 2 firms under contract that were representing the council in the case. One woman retired. Another person decided that they wanted to take a job outside the state. And so it seemed to us to make perfect sense to move at least the most complex ones to the AGO, since they regularly work in this area. They have a deep bench and their rates are really good, so that's a good thing. So the not exceed to amount in the contract was $500,000. We added a parcel. We settled, or we've been able to finalize 9 of the parcels. 7 remain, and while there's still some money left in the contract, we think we need probably $150,000 to get all of the parcels to the finish line. And so that's what this business item is trying to accomplish, is to add $150,000 to the contract, but it's also updating the rates for legal services for fiscal year 2026 and 2027. Lastly, I would just point out that the cost of this amendment is already included in the overall project budget. And so, Madam Chair, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward business item, but Madam Chair, members, if you have any questions, I'm happy to.
All right, thank you, Peter. Any
Sure.
questions? All right, seeing none then, we have a motion before us that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute an amendment to contract 21I041 with the Minnesota Attorney General's Office to update the rates for legal services for fiscal year 2026 and 2027 and add a not to exceed amount of $150,000 for a total contract not to exceed amount of $650,000. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Lilligren, seconded by Osman. I'm sorry, Barber, seconded by Osman. My goodness. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And thank you very much. Thanks, Peter, for being here. Our next item is 2025-105. It's a same week item. It's authorization for an internal loan for Environmental Services Capital Fund. And we have Mark Thompson, our Director of Treasury here. And maybe others, if we have questions, they can take a look at this item for us. So thank you for being here, Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. Yes, Mark Thompson, I'm the Treasury Director for the Council, and I am presenting business item 2025-105, which is a same week item. We're bringing this same week because if we waited for the next council meeting, it would be after the fact for our policy. So This item is requesting an internal loan to fill a funding gap for our environmental services capital fund. So as you know, we issue bonds every year to fund capital expenditures for approximately 12 months for our divisions, and occasionally those expenditures happen larger and faster than we expected, and that's the case for the environmental services division. Currently, they've spent all the bond money from the 24 bond issuance, and the fund went negative in March. So our new bonds, which I'll talk more about in a few minutes, don't settle till May 1st. So we've got a short-term funding gap for their capital fund. So this item is, I guess let me back up a second. Well, really what caused this was a large $10.8 million project that was unable to be funded by PFA loans, so it had to be moved to bond funding. Environmental Services uses both PFA loans and bond funding for their capital. So there was an Excelsior area lift station project that was $10.8 million that had to move to bond funding. So we went through their 24 bond money quicker than expected. So policy says there's a council policy FM 2-2 finance and asset management that allows these short-term loans to fund short-term temporary cash flow gaps. And it says we have to get council approval if we go over $10 million or if the negative balance is for longer than 3 months. And as I mentioned, it went negative in March. It was touch and go whether we were gonna hit that $10 million threshold. So we went forward and brought this item, and it looks like by the end of April, it'll probably be $12 to $15 million negative, so. Then that'll be covered by the new bond funds, starting May 1st, so. This isn't, I'll also mention this approval is not authorizing any new spending. This is all previously approved, through the budget or capital expenditures. So it's strictly a cash flow issue. The funding comes from the general investment pool, and the negative fund is charged negative interest on a monthly basis till it's rectified. So that's what this is about. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, then seeing none, we have the proposed action before us that the Metropolitan Council authorize an internal loan to fund environmental services capital expenditure cash flow until 2025. Bond funding is available per the report that we've received today. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
By Cedarburg, second by Lilligren. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. And those opposed, no, and that passes unanimously, so thank you. And then Mark, we've got you here for an information item, and this is bond sales results. This is always fun to see what happened, although.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we did, as I just mentioned, we issue bonds for our 3 divisions, which the council approved resolutions to issue those bonds back in March. And we sold bonds on April 1st for parks, transit, and wastewater bonds for environmental services. And I'll go over the results. Like I said, it was sold March 1st. I think I mentioned this last time I was here that we did get AAA ratings for all of our bonds from both Moody's and Standard & Poor's. So maintaining those strong ratings, which we've had AAA for a number of years now, is very important for us to get the lowest interest rates possible. We sell our bonds competitively, so investors look for that AAA. We had really strong results I'll tell you about in a moment for participation in our bidding. The ratings also are about demonstrate our stewardship of our financials. So the rating agencies look at our financials, they look at our debt load, they look at our area economy, and they look at our governance as kind of the 4 big categories. And we get strong ratings in all those, which is great. So a little shout out, since they're all in the room here, when we go through this ratings process, it's a few months of hard work for a number of people. So shout out to Ed Petrie from Transit and Heather Giesel from MTS, and Ned, of course, the CFO, and Matt Selmeyer from ES. Also Stuart, our budget director, is involved, and Nathan Scott is in the Treasury Department also. So just a shout out to everybody. We have a long process we go through to interview with the agencies and put together all the information they need. So we've done a good job, and it's paid off. A little bit about the sale itself. We, like I said, we sold on April 1st. All the sales met the financial parameters that were established in the original resolutions as far as the timing, the size, and the interest rate. We had really strong investor interest, as I mentioned, for all three. We timed the market great. As you know, interest rates have been really volatile lately, and they happened to be in a dip that week, so that paid off, and I'll tell you those numbers. For transit, we sold 77.7 million of 10-year bonds at a 3.09 interest rate, and we had projected 3.30 a week earlier, so we beat it by a good amount. In fact, when I brought the resolutions forward in March, we were predicting 3.78, so we were significantly under that. We had 11 bidders. Typically we get 8 or 9 for our transit bonds. For environmental services, we had 12 bidders. Typically 8 or 9 for wastewater is what we usually see for bidders. These are 20-year bonds. We sold 74.5 million at a 3.82, a little higher because it's a longer structure. That beat our expectations, a projected rate of 4%. And those two, both the wastewater and the transit, were sold to Bank of America. The parks bonds, we had 9 bidders, which is like double the normal number of bidders we get on our parks bonds. These are 5-year bonds. We sold 9.7 million at a 2.81 to JP Morgan. That beat our projected rate of 3.10. And all 3 of these, as I mentioned, will close May 1st. So we're in the middle of putting together our final documents, and then we'll be done. So happy to answer any more questions on those.
Thank you for that report. Are there any questions? No, I just want to congratulate you. I mean, the market is what the market is, but you always seem to figure out when those dips or whatever are. And
we sold them on April Fool's Day, man.
That's just perfect. We're gonna pick all those holidays from now on and do some crazy things here at my council, because why not? And I just have to say too, these are just, again, really great bond rates. Shows again the investor interest, because we're such a strong organization, AAA bond rated continuously, can't take that ever for granted. And it's a great investment in our region at a really good price for our taxpayers. So again, thank you to you and all the people across the divisions who work on this all the time to make it happen. And we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I just ask you?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, great work.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is really amazing. And I'm just wondering, background in the staff report references that the information provided sales results, and I think what you just shared is incredibly good news. And I believe there's at least a segment of our population here that would be interested in some of that detail and a little bit of the color that you added just about catching the market and the dips and things. And so I'm just wondering, does that appear, was that on a dashboard somewhere, or does that additional information appear anywhere?
No, Madam Chair, Councilmember, we don't publish it anywhere.
Okay.
There are certainly things I could provide. We have the ratings, we get reports from the rating agencies.
Sure. That
could be distributed, which talk a lot about how they rate us.
Sure.
And things like that. We also get a report from our municipal advisor, who we work closely with in predicting interest rates and structuring our bonds. They give us a final report.
Sure.
Before the sale, what they expect to happen, and that gives a lot of color to it.
Yeah, cool, thanks. And I just, we, at the Met Council, we take a lot of criticism, justly or unjustly, about our fiscal responsibility. And I figure when we have such good news like this, it would behoove us to kind of at least have it somewhere. So,
Post it.
yeah, post it somewhere.
And in our inbox, we get the nice region-wide what's going on things, even, there certainly could be something, I think, added in there that doesn't go deep that, but enough where people across the region, especially our partners, knowing that we're AAA bond rated, we're very conservative when it comes to these types of investments and making sure they're going appropriately to all of our really well thought out projects, and I think great for the legislature to know it too.
I agree.
Yeah, so I don't know who's in the room that might wanna pass that on to communications, but just
Yeah.
something about our fiscal, stewardship. It is part of the Thrive, lens that we put
Madam
everything.
Chair, I'll be happy to look into that.
Yeah,
Report
that'd be
back.
great. Thank you, and
It
again,
seems very logical to me too.
well, and especially in this environment, when everything is just crazy. It's just nice to see things like this that are still steady as she goes, making sure things are happening correctly, and so, good job, thank you. I have one quick thing for you, it's not on the agenda, not going off to you, but, when will you be coming before us, next with the, institutions that we authorize kind of on a certain type of basis, all of our financial institutions? And the only reason I'm asking is I saw Bremer's being acquired by Old National Bank.
Oh,
Yeah, and just wondering, down the road, it'll be interesting to see how that works, because Bremer's on our list and how, so that's all.
right.
A
Madam
big
Chair,
change for St. Paul, for sure.
That's an annual item
Okay.
that'll come
December,
November-ish.
November, okay. All right, perfect.
I'll
right.
make a note of that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
We have one more item before us, and we've got Ned Smith, our Chief Financial Officer, here for this, and again, a very interesting Q4 2024 financial report, and we've got a presentation with us, so welcome to Ned, and all the people who know all the things about all of our finances are here today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. It certainly takes a village. So my name is Ned Smith, and I am the Chief Financial Officer of the Metropolitan Council. This is what do we do this? 3 times a year check-in. Normally, it's more of our forecast. We're telling you how it's been so far for the year and then what we're looking for the rest of the year. In this case, this is the 4th quarter, which is kind of a misnomer for 24. It's actually all of 24. So it's a review of how the 24 ended out and what some of the key drivers were for the performance. So the most important thing to know is all of our operating reserves are well above target. So financially, we're in a good position with healthy reserves in all, well above the target being a target percentage that's set by policy for what we need in case of a rainy day. And you can see that all of our divisions and the general fund are above. So for what's driving that for the general fund, a good year for us. Revenues were over $1 billion. That's primarily due to better investment earnings. That's a recurring theme, a little foreshadowing there. And then our expenses were under budget by about $9 million, and that is due almost entirely to underruns in salaries and consulting across all of our divisions. Slightly offset by IS as we work to improve our capabilities in IS. Particularly our consulting budget was over in IS, although the salaries budget was under, and that's kind of related. So if we can't hire fast enough, we go out and get consultants to help fill in those gaps. So that was a primary driver for our expenses. And again, this is, as we continue to grow, we're expanding our capabilities, and we are putting in place positions, but it takes time to hire those positions. So that's why our some of our salaries were under budget. So you can see your end of balance there at 29 million of reserve. We do have a couple of dedicated things that kind of don't touch this money, and that is driven by our risk. Self-insurance, we set aside 2.5 million. Compensated absences, that's people earn vacation days, and as they spend them, we spend it out of here, so we don't want to spend that money. And my mother's calling. And then,
Take it, because mothers are very important
Right.
people.
and then regional water, we'll just let that go. And then regional water supply, that's dedicated funds to help with putting together our regional water supply for drinking water and other uses that cannot use environmental services revenue. They have to come up with separate funds for that. So with that, I will, any questions on the general fund?
No.
All right.
Alright, hi everyone, my name is Matt Salmeyer, I'm a finance manager in environmental services, and I'll walk you through our year-end numbers now. On the revenue side, we are $7.5 million over budget. As Ned hinted at, investment earnings were pretty strong this year, that's about $3 million, a little over $3 million of that. The other bigger piece, slightly bigger, is in industrial waste. Our revenue was, we had a pretty conservative budget, so that's part of it. We're sort of starting to ramp up that budget a little bit as we look at 25 and 26. And then the other thing is there's about $1 million correction that number's about $1 million high for revenue. There was a error that was found with one of our customers that was overbilled, but they're still working to try and understand that error and trying to understand how that credit and money is gonna go back to the customer, if they're gonna get a credit on their bill or if they're gonna get a check or something of that, maybe not a check, but an electronic payment or something of that nature. So that's why we didn't accrue for it this year, because we don't know the final number yet. But that's pretty much, it's industrial waste and it's our investment earnings is why our revenues are higher.
And just a quick question, so will that come out as an amended 2024 Q4, or will that show up then in like Q1 or 2 or whenever it gets figured out in this year as an adjustment? I'm just curious how the accounting over the year works.
Madam Chair, members of the management committee, it should show up in 2025, and it would probably only be an amendment if we were gonna end the year. I think we'd only amend if we're gonna be higher than our expense budgets. Ned's shaking his head, so on the revenue side, I don't think there would be an amendment needed unless we were to be higher than our expense budget. So it's on the revenue side, I guess, I think is according to our policies.
Okay,
Does that answer the question?
it does.
Okay.
Yeah. The rationale makes sense too, but I'm not one of you people, so what do I know? But yeah, I'm curious how this gets adjusted at the end of the year, but no worries.
Thank you. On the expense side, we're $4.6 million over. This is primarily savings in utilities, so natural gas prices have dropped, that's really helped us out. And then we've also seen a reduction in fuel charges on the electric side, so Xcel Energy will burn coal, they'll burn natural gas, and they'll produce electricity. It's maybe 30% of how they're producing electricity, and those prices were probably 3 times higher a few years ago than what we're seeing now, so there's some beneficial savings there. And there's also some process improvements at Metro Plant that are helping as well. So that's slightly offset by contract services. It's a little bit higher with inflation, things like there were some flood related costs. So our security and insurance contracts are a little bit higher. They go up a little bit each year, things of that nature. So that's coming in with a combined $4.6 million over an expense. Transfers, $0.5 million under. It's driven by RA expenses running under in information services. And the activity will add $12.7 million to our operating reserve, which will bring it up to $57.1 million, which is roughly $40 million over our target balance. On to our sewer availability charges, the units, SAC units. We ended the year with 17,037 units. The biggest drop was in apartments. We planned for around 19,000 units, so it's a little bit under expectation, but not nearly as low as we saw in 2008, 2009 recession. And the next slide will show you our reserve balance, which is still very healthy. So it's actually healthier than I thought we were going to end the year when we were doing forecasts earlier in the year. That is in part because we expected SAC to go down because we were using $8.5 million of the SAC reserve to help fund PAYGO. That helps with rate mitigation on our municipal wastewater charges. And then we were about $4 to $5 million under in units, but what I was not really expecting or thinking about is that we also earned $5 million in investment earnings in our SAC fund. So that helps keep us a little healthier at the end of the year with our SAC reserve balance than we might have been projecting. So that's good news, I'd say. With that, I'll turn it over for any questions.
Are there any questions? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question on the SAC unit. So when I look in areas in my district, there's a lot of building going on and a lot of apartments. And so are those things that were permitted like the end of 2022 or something that are being built now? Or is it, I'm just curious, what I see in my community is very different than this.
Yeah, when do the numbers show up?
Yeah.
At which time on the graphs? Because,
Looking at that.
essentially when are
Does he have an answer?
those permits, SAC unit permits
So
pulled that we'd start counting versus
We-
billed?
we click the clicker when the permit is issued.
Yeah.
Which is before you'd see the
Before you
building.
see the
But I'm not exactly sure what that lag is, but it's,
Just curious.
the determinant for us is you can't get a permit issued until you've paid your SAC.
Okay.
Yeah, same thing with building permits, it's, you know, you get a great number, but how long, depending on what the market's doing or financing or whatever, then it shows up in weird ways in the real market sometimes. Great question, cause I was thinking that too, but
Lots
Okay.
of apartments in my building, or in
Yeah.
my town, so.
you got all kinds of things going
Keep 'em
on down there.
coming.
Commercial.
Vegas.
I know, I'm coming down there, right, take the light rail and almost get there. Okay, we can keep going.
I think it is Heather next.
Madam Chair, committee members, I'm Heather Giesel, the Director of Finance and Administration for Community Development and Metropolitan Transportation Services. For Housing and Redevelopment Authority, revenues ended the year 2.4 million above budget. This was due to higher than expected admin fees from HUD, as well as higher interest earnings. In the last report, we were waiting on revenues from HUD. We anticipated that we would be on budget. We actually ended the year a little bit above. Expenses are unfavorable to budget by approximately 1 million. We're continuing to see rent increases across the region, and that's driving costs up. We were on budget everywhere else but those rental assistance payments, so that's something that we're continuing to look at as we budget into 2026, because they've just been growing and growing for the last couple of years. Reserves ended the year at 16.6 million, which is well above our target balance. You can stand for any questions now.
Are there any questions? Councilmember
Yeah,
Bulliger?
thanks, yeah, Heather, just on the point about the, I guess subsidy we would call it, for these rents, right? And so this is something that you said we've been seeing for a few years now, and is this, how are we planning for this, if this is a trend that continues? I mean, this is, I assume this is right out of our general fund, this subsidy, or is that something that HUD ultimately reimburses us for, or what? What's the contingency?
Madam Chair, committee members, the voucher payments are subsidied by the HUD admin, the HUD administrative fees and the HUD subsidies. So we'll just keep an eye on how many vouchers we're able to offer, and those sorts of things. But yeah, we're just kind of planning for what the subsidy amount is versus how many vouchers we'll receive and what we'll be able to offer as far as the subsidy amount, but.
Okay, thank you, thanks.
Yeah, sure, thank you. Okay, move on.
And then moving on to transportation side, Metro Mobility ended the year $2.4 million lower than budgeted. This was due to lower ridership than anticipated. We had been budgeting Metro Mobility at 100% of pre-COVID levels. We dropped that to 95% of pre-COVID levels for 2024, but are continuing to see ridership at about 87-88%. So that's been the trend for the last couple of years. This was offset slightly by higher interest earnings in the revenue column. Expenses were favorable to budget by just under 6 million. Lower Metro Move activity, as well as some additional expenses that were added during the Q2 amendment of last year, helped to bring this favorable to budget. We also had $4 million in fuel savings. We had budgeted fuel at $3.46 per gallon. It came in at about $2.42 per gallon, combined with lower vehicle revenue hours, contributed to that $4 million in savings. Reserves ended the year at 13.5 million. Our target balance is at, which is higher than our target balance of approximately $6 million. So we'll be spending closer to our target at 5% until the state takes over in July of this year.
That's right.
Can stand for any questions.
Councilmember Barber? Oh, and then Cedarburg.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So Metro Move is obviously a piece of this. Is the state taking that part too, or we just keep that?
Madam Chair, committee members, yes, Metro Move is included in that, it is under the umbrella of the special transportation services
Thank you.
as well, so.
Thought so, but I was.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good question.
It probably, since we're shifting over to the state, but some of the numbers, how much was this affected by not having enough drivers to actually run some of the routes, and so the lower ridership is because, it's maybe not that much, but in my district, there was some issues with, having less drivers.
Madam Chair, committee members, Charles is back here, I don't know if you know how much that impacted or if it's just a demand of, driven on demand.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, council members, Charles Carlson, Executive Director for MTS. We have not denied any rides since January 2nd of 2024, so
Okay,
in terms of ride denials, that would not be reflected because we met all the rides. However, we have been working to schedule rides outside of the peak in some cases on our non-ADA service for
those
area
are the routes, right.
in order to meet the peak capacity that we do have, both from a fleet and a driver standpoint, and to manage our costs to a certain extent. So it may reflect a slight reduction in growth because of that shift to off-peak travel when possible, but we also are accommodating that travel when necessary, so we're not denying rides.
Thank you. Anything else on this? Great.
Madam Chair, committee members, Ed Petrie, Director of Finance, Metro Transit. First I'll kick off with motor vehicle sales tax. Motor vehicle sales tax end of the year, just about 95% of the November 2024 forecast. If you recall, we as a council made a decision to budget 95% of the forecast. Anything received in excess of that would go into the future year operations. So we're basically, as of the end of the year, we're basically right on target with what we had budgeted. That leaves us with ending year reserves at just, I can read it here, at just almost $34 million in reserves. We know we need for cash flow purposes about $15 to $20 million in reserve for cash flows, depending upon when the receipts are received, but we have about $33.5 million in reserves at the end of the year. The good news side, the real good news side is on the regional sales tax. Regional sales tax, January through December, we actually achieved 101.4% of the February 24 forecast. So we're basically just right above what the forecast was. So we're very, very happy about it. That's the sales tax that started back in October of 2023. So that is performing as we had hoped it would perform. That leaves us then with reserves at the end of the year we had about $120 million, just over $120 million in the bank, if you will. Because if you recall, what we'll do is we'll budget it during the operating budget process, and then we bring various capital budget, Heather and I will bring capital budget amendments forward to put dollars then into the capital project. But we have just over $120 million left in the bank as of the end of 2024. So that's very good news, and that's also on target. When we had talked about the forecast last fall, this is right on target with where we thought we would be at the end of this year. So that is very good news for us.
It's really good news. Thank you.
Is there a question?
I did have a question.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really quick, are we now in a place, because I know when we first started, there was a lag of the funds coming in because it was getting the process of how this money came in to Council and Metro Transit. Are we all, is it coming in at a regular pace now?
Madam Chair, committee members, yes it is. Yeah, you're totally recalling correctly. When it first started, it was lagging, and we could tell we were down about 20% from what the forecast was. Now we're right on top of that.
Okay.
So we don't know if it was just a slow implementation by some of the vendors, by some of the retailers, but we're right on top of where we should be right now.
Just a lot of businesses pay their sales tax into the state quarterly, so you
And
could
it
see
could
where
have
that
been
could
that way,
happen, and so, yeah, I was just kinda curious.
Yeah.
And then maybe for you, Ed, or maybe you, Councilmember Barber too, or, Charles, we were also working with our local units of government trying to true up that timing. So this is the year, I think, when that's all happening. So it's good to see that we're where we expect to be, because that's, I would imagine, very critical for making sure that our local partners are getting what, they're due as well. Councilmember Pacheco.
Madam Chair, members, what impact has the black license plate had on the revenue here?
Madam Chair, committee members, that would be, I'm not,
Yeah, sure, I would just, former friend here.
If there's ever a trivia, we're ready to all of
Thank
you with us.
Madam Chair, I believe that those funds are currently deposited in the driver and vehicle services budget and do not touch the highway user funding that, might flow to elsewhere. So not our funding source, though there are proposals at the Capitol to divert some of that into roadway funding, but nonetheless, I don't believe we would see it if they made that change, and there's some opposition to making that change anyway.
Sure,
But
of course.
none comes to us, is the short one.
And thank you, Mr. Carlson.
Yeah, seriously, if there's trivia, our trivia is what you guys are all done.
If I could add,
Oh, yeah,
Madam
absolutely.
Chair, to the extent that, the council passed a interim funding distribution for 2025 with the suburban transit providers that now uses actual receipts. As of this month, we actually know the January collections on the sales tax and either are dispersing or have dispersed
They've been dispersed.
have dispersed the first payment under actuals. So we're on that regular schedule of the 2025 collections, and disbursements have begun.
That's great, good. Anything else on that? Oh, that sparked some interest, so that was fun. Okay, Metro bus, or transit bus operations.
Okay, Madam Chair, committee members, I'll now go into Metro Transit Bus, the light rail and commuter rail. First off, for bus operations, we added a planned use reserves of about $101 million for the year. We're forecasting to end the year with these use reserves of about $32 million. As you can see, that gives us ending reserve balances of about $229 million versus our target of 39. Once again, as I stated also last quarter, the reason our reserves are so high, if you recall back in 2023, we had heard at the federal level that potentially could have been the clawback of the federal dollars. We chose to draw, as the council chose to draw with eligible expenses, draw as much of that money as we could in. We had planned to use it in 2025, but we drew it in 2023 and put it into our reserves because we didn't want to take the risk of the clawback at the federal level. So that's the reason we have such significant reserves, but per our long-term financial plans, the plan is to spend these dollars down over the next year to 2 years. So we're still on target with that, but I always look at it, it's in the bank of the council versus the Bank of Washington DC, so it's in our bank right now, so.
And Ed, it's been allocated to a certain project, so that it was brought in, I'm assuming, for not just capital funds, or just to go against our capital plan?
Madam Chair, committee members, it was brought into the Metropolitan Council and it was deposited into bus operations.
Got it, okay.
So we put some in bus operations, some in rail operations, depending upon, because when we get to the rail, you also see they have a significant reserve.
Okay,
But it's ready to be used now in 2025.
great.
Absolutely. So overall, is there another question?
I don't
Okay.
think so.
Overall with revenues, we had a negative variance of about $3.1 million. Part of that, the overall, if you break the $3.1 million down, there's a few components. First of all, investment earnings are about $12 million higher than what we had anticipated. That's due to the significant fund balance. The fund balance drew a lot of earnings, about $12 million. Our passenger fares were below budget of about $8 million due to lower than anticipated ridership. One of the other challenges that we're working on the bus system and also on the light rail system is our average fare per passenger. Right now through 2024, our average fare per passenger is around 93 cents per passenger. Historically, it usually ran about $1.20. It's been slowly coming up during 2024, and we anticipate with the additional presence on the line, there will be more fare compliance. It should continue to move itself back up. Federal revenue was down about $4.9 million during the year. That was something that I worked on with Stuart and with Heather on. Metro Mobility needed additional funds to get them through June 30th of 2025. So we underdrew $4.9 million on the bus side for Metro Transit, held it into the council's portion for federal dollars, and now it's going to be drawn on Metro Mobility during the first 6 months of 2025. Ridership levels, I'll quickly talk about them. Compared to 2019 levels, our bus ridership is running at about 62% of 2019 levels. Light rail is basically right on top of bus, they mirror each other. They're at about 61% of 2019 levels. North Star is running at about 17% of 19 levels. If we look at ridership through the period of March 2025, we saw ridership was significantly down in the month of the month of January. We do know a big portion of that would be due to the cold weather though. Historically, anytime you have a very big, strong cold snap, ridership goes down. We are seeing though, overall on bus ridership for the month of March, we're down about 1%. So ridership has come back in the month of March. Light rail ridership is down about 15% and North Star is down about 9% from 1 year ago. So one of the things that we're doing is that a lot of additional analysis now at Metro Transit. We're actually breaking it down now to the time of day, the trips, and try to identify if there's pockets and if we can identify what's causing those pockets. Because we knew with the month of January, you can't really analyze that, but now with the month of March, it's somewhat, the weather's normalized itself. So now we can start looking at the pockets and try to determine what the cause it might be. On the expenses are overall under budget, about $75 million. About $50 million of this is due to open positions and operators, as we talked about earlier in the year, mechanics, and the police department. We also have some savings in fuel, parts, and technical services, and the council allocations were at the budgeted levels. So once again, bus operations will end the year with reserves of about $229 million versus the target of 39. So I would stand for questions on bus before I move on to light rail.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, we can keep moving.
Okay, Metro Transit light rail. We had originally had a planned use reserves of about $11.9 million. We're actually going to come in with a positive variance of about $2.8 million. That'll bring us to reserve levels of $25 million versus the target of $9.5 million. And Madam Chair, like I mentioned on the previous slide, you can see the reason for the significant reserves on the light rail side also was due to the additional federal pull in 2023 built the reserves up. Overall, on the revenue side, we have a negative variance of about $300,000, so pretty close to budget. On the light rail side, they have investment earnings that are nearly $1 million over budget, once again due to the significant reserve balance. Passenger fares were down about $1.7 million. That's mainly due to the average fare per passenger. Average fare per passenger is running between 80 and 82 cents per passenger versus a historical average of $1.05. That also is slowly starting to move itself up late in 2024. On the expense side, expenses were below budget about $14 million. The biggest piece of this, once again, will be salaries and benefits of $10 million, which is mainly in the operators and the mechanics side. We also had savings in materials and supplies and some savings in utilities. So overall, we're forecasting to have a reserve balance of just over 25 million versus the target of 9.5. And with that, Madam Chair, I would stand for any questions on light rail before I go to commuter.
Questions on light rail? All right, seeing none, we can keep moving.
Okay, let's keep going here. Commuter rail operations. We had a planned use reserves of about $3.1 million. We're going to use about $49,000 during the year. So we'll end the reserve balance at just over $11 million versus a target of $1.5 million. So that we're in very good position on commuter rail operations. On the revenue side, we had a negative variance of about $200,000 for the year. Passenger fares make up $100,000 of that. One of the things with the passenger fares that we noticed though, is the fact is that I talked about this decline on the bus side, the decline on the rail side on the average fare per passenger. On the commuter rail side, it pretty well stayed the same. The average fare didn't really change. The average fare right now for 2024 was $306, and it normally would run about $325. So pretty close for the average fare. On the expenses, overall expenses were about $1.8 million. 1.6 of that is salaries and benefits, and then the fuel is under budget about $400,000. So with that, once again, that brings us to ending reserves of just over 11 million versus a target of 1.5.
Great, any questions on commuter rail? Seeing none? Anything at all? Anything else that you want to mention to us? Covered everything. Any final questions on this? All right, well, thank you. We really appreciate this. It's good news and good planning and, foresight and, again, we're just, in, uncertain times really across the world and our nation and how that would trickle down through the state and to us, but, we've got great confidence in all of you and we'll be doing what we need to be doing and we're in a good position. So, thank you, and we will see you in a few months again for our next quarterly report. So thank you all, have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, we have reached the end of our agenda. Is there anything else that should come before this body? Seeing none, then meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.